Good morning. Welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Gerber here, your host on Revival Reform Radio, doing her live talk program covering your importance of church on your Tuesday morning Rise and Shine. The importance of church we're looking at here this morning as we look at our topic, the path to finding God and the faith I live by. The path to finding God and the faith I live by. This is our topic for meditation this morning here as we do our live talk program. Welcome. Hopefully, you had a blessed night rest. And thanks for joining me here this morning. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank you again, dear Lord, for your blessings. We thank you for your mercies. We thank you for the wisdom that you bestow upon us from day to day. Pray to may bless us as we study your word and look at these issues for life and for eternity. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So again, we're looking at this topic here and the path to finding God and the faith I live by. And I could have entitled it, I guess, the path to finding God or the faith I live by. But it's an and or. There's a continuous discussion that's going on in society about the way to God or which way it is to salvation or all these things. So there's various different discussions that are going on. And this morning I have an article of a current event that is happening in the world, in the social media, in the religious world. And so I wanted to take that and layer it on this general discussion that often happens is amongst many faith communities. Is there one way to God? And what the Bible states about the way to salvation. Is there one way to God? And so this is what we want to look at here this morning. So we start out by going to this text here, which is in John chapter 4, verse 19 through 20. John chapter 4, verse 19 through 20. And we read a discussion here between Christ and the woman at the well. And it's a very important passage of scripture. And here Christ states something that is profound in his discussion with the woman. And John chapter 4, verse 19 through 24 state, the woman said unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worship in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. So here they believe in God. The Jews believe in God. She asks Christ a question, where is a proper place to worship? So normally when we start talking about faith communities is the discussion becomes what denomination, what religious group do you belong to, what affiliation? And here Christ is going to state something profound. Jesus said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. So before it continues, I'll pause there. So she's asking, what's the proper place to worship? Here, in this religious area, in this religious mountain, or in the religious mountain that the Jews have, which is Jerusalem? He says the hour is coming. It's a time coming when it's not going to be really either there or here, when men will worship the Father. Verse 22 says, You worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jew. So if you take verse 21, you could see, somebody could say, well, here it is. Christ is saying, it really doesn't matter. God just wants somebody to worship him. But he states now, which could complicate the matter as we keep drilling down into this little talk here. He states that what they're worshiping, they don't know what they're worshiping. There's some ignorance in their worship. He's saying that there's some lack of truth in their worship. But he said, we know what we worship. So again, based upon your path or faith that you live by, could really adjust if you're worshiping God in what Christ is going to say, an expert in truth. So he says, we know what we worship. So he says the Jews have the right path to worship and the right path to God. So this here would even contradict what many people say and what I'm going to read next in the statement of the preacher, that Christ is saying that you can have to learn the Jewish way to understand the path to salvation. It's a very clear statement. We know what we worship. He said, you don't know what you worship, but we know what we worship. That's a profound statement in itself. For salvation is of the the Jews. So if you want to be saved, you have to understand salvation from a Jewish point of view. At this point when Christ was standing. So here it would seem very clear that Christ is saying there's one way to salvation, one path, one way to finding salvation you have to go through. Because if they say they're worshiping God, which is the Samaritan, and Christ is saying they don't know what they're worshiping, and they said it's God, and Christ says you don't even know what it is you're worshiping. That's a profound statement in verse 22. You don't know what you're worshiping. We know what we worship. But she just says they're worshiping God, and Christ, who is the Son of God, is saying, you don't even know what you're worshiping. You say you're worshiping God, but you don't know what you're worshiping. That's one of those things like, oh, wow. Anyhow, verse 23. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. So, it's not just worshiping, say, I worship God. There has to be a certain spirit to the worship, the attitude that we come to worship. So, the behavior of the person matters. The attitude of the person matters in worship. So somebody could say, well, but what if a person was a Jew and they worship him God, but they have a rotten attitude when they come to worship? Christ says, again, very profoundly, it matters your behavior. It matters what you do as an individual when you present yourself to worshiping God. Because if you know what you're worshiping, but your attitude and your behavior in worship would be instructed by what you know, truth would affect it. And he says you have to worship God in truth. So if a group is worshiping God in falsehood, then Christ says, do you know what you're worshiping? Because God is looking for true worshipers who worship him in truth. Notice it says, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. So God is saying, not everybody that's worshiping me is worshiping me then in truth. Because if he's looking, that means he's not always finding. That would be the normal breakdown to me in that text or that statement he's making. And then verse 24 says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So God is a spirit. So our forms of worship have to take on something that is more spiritual. It can't be always just carnal. But if you notice, the way many churches do worship is always focused on less truth, less spirit, and more carnality, more to feed the flesh. The more the flesh is fed with the way people dress, the way people act, the way people talk, that is more prideful and more carnal, is the more the worshippers can pack the house. But he's saying God's not looking for that. So that's profound when we talk about, again, the path to finding God and the faith I live by. The faith I live by. Does that affect who I worship when I claim I worship God? So this brings me to this text, or this reading here, that I'm going to read this article from Christian Post, written by Leonardo Blair, and it's entitled Belief Jesus' Only Way to Heaven is Insanity, megachurch pastor Michael A. Walrond Jr. says. So this pastor here from over New York, Harlem area, he said that believing that Jesus is the only way to salvation is insanity. Our only way to heaven is insanity. So here now, Christian Post here, continue. So this is from New York here. Michael A. Walrond Jr., one of New York City's most influential pastors, who lead the more than 10,000 member First Corinthian Baptist Church in Harlem, is coming under fire online for telling his congregants that the belief that Jesus is the only way to heaven is insanity. Prior to preaching one of his sermons at First Corinthian just over 2 weeks ago, Walrond asked the congregation to recite their purpose statement, which he says shape our identity as a congregation. Quote, we are an ever evolving community of visionaries. Visionaries, that's fascinating. Continue reading. So, ever evolving community of visionaries, dreamers, and doers who have been called by God to live the lives we were created to live, commanded by God to live beyond the limits of our prejudices, and commissioned by God to serve, the statement reads. It was while explaining the statement of those who were not familiar with the church's position that he explained his multiple ways to God concept. Quote, if you are a person who believes in God, these words can apply to you, no matter what your faith background. We get so twisted in this community and in many cultures to create divides and boundaries and barriers between human beings because of our faith differences, says the pastor who was named one of the Lord's foot soldiers by Newsweek magazine, a secular group of people naming who is God's foot soldiers. Very fascinating. Think about it, that we use the thing that we think makes us closer to God, the very thing to divide us from one another at times. And that makes no sense. So I am not one of those people, end of quote. Continue quoting here says, there was a time when you would see people in the pulpit say, well, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. That's insanity in many ways, because that is not what Jesus even believed. And so the key is you believe in God, and whatever your path to God, I celebrate that. Personally, I celebrate that, he said, to a smattering of applause. Again, we have enough in this world that divides us. We need to find those things that brings us together. And if God cannot bring us closer together, then something is wrong. Not with God, but it is how we think we know God and understand God. Right? So I'm going to keep reading here. Just give me 1 second as I keep plugging away at this. That's strange. Okay, sorry for that, please. So personally, I celebrate that. He said to a smattering of applause. Sorry, a 57-second clip of Walron's statement was posted to Facebook by Kevin O'Davis, Minister of Music for Friendship Baptist Church in Texas, sparked a massive debate online. More than 32,000 people have viewed the clip, and many have condemned Walron for what they say is an apparent contradiction of Scripture. And Bishop E.R. Smith, founder of the Total Outreach to Christian Ministry Inc. and the Word of Outreach Christian Center and Academy in Little Rock, Arkansas, said Warland is both right and wrong. The preacher on this video is both right and wrong. He is right in that all roads do lead to God, but this God is both love and consuming fire. If you meet him on Christ's road, is love you live, but any other road, be it religion, philosophy, and miscalculation of the person of Christ, the lake of fire is waiting. So I guess he's saying there, let me just pause there because that sounds like some double speak, but I guess he's saying there that, well, you're going to meet Christ one way, either way, either through the lake of fire or through going to heaven. It's kind of some strange talk. If you meet Christ in lake of fire, you really didn't meet Christ. It is crazy. Anyhow, so the Christian Post reached out to Walron through his church on Monday, but he was unavailable by press time. Warren serves as a trustee and adjunct faculty member of Chicago Theological Seminary and the board of visitors of Duke University Divinity School. So this is the type of stuff you're going to learn from those two institutions. Ken Stone, academic dean at Chicago Theological Seminary, says Reverend Warren openness to the truth and wisdom found in multiple religious tradition and its celebration of multiple paths to God is something the institution support. So this whole institution support that. I don't know that we would use exactly the same language to describe it, but in terms of the openness to truth and wisdom found in multiple religious traditions, absolutely we would support that. Institutionally, we do celebrate multiple paths to God and to God's wisdom and the truth, and that what I understand also be Reverend Walron position. He noted that the seminary is open to all students and faculty regardless of faith. There are evangelical Muslims studying the seminary and even students who describe to no particular faith or subscribe to no particular faith at all. Part of our scholarship does deal with dogma, but the student who come here and the faculty that teach here are not asked to adopt a single religious perspective. They are asked to understand multiple religious perspective, and on the basis of their engagement with multiple religious perspective to be able to articulate their own views. Religious diversity is a hallmark of our school. We're very proud of it, and we think that the future of theological education, and we are very proud to be associated with Reverend Warren. Warren is not the first prominent Christian leader to express the idea that faith in Jesus, the basis of Christianity, isn't the only way to salvation. Shannon Johnson Keshner, who leads the 5,500 member Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago, Illinois, expressed similar beliefs last fall. God's not a Christian. I mean, we are. For me, she continues saying, the Christian tradition is the way to understanding God and my relationship with the world and other human being. It is the way to move to into the relationship. But I am not about to say what God can and cannot do in other ways and with other spiritual experience, she explained. End of article. So that's an article about that gentleman here from over by New York, who is basically stating that there are many ways to God. So hence my title, The Path to Finding God and the Faith I Live By. Because I think sometimes the question is being discussed. How do I find God? Forget about the other pastor talking about you're going to meet God either by hell or something. That's crazy talk. Because if I meet God in hell, that's not meeting God. Anyhow, so the path to finding God or the faith I live by, right? So if the question is how do I get to find God, and somebody said, well, at one point I was secular, then I became an animist, then I started following a shaman, and then I went and became a Baptist and then a Methodist, and I just keep bouncing around until one day, I opened up my eye and my spirituality was established. But it was a very circular path, and I learned along the way. And now I feel like the United Nations, or I feel like the worldwide church with all kind of religious belief. But I found God, and now I'm in the truth. There per se is not no argument against that. The very twisting and winding path a person could take to where they say, I'm home now, I'm settled. So is that the question that often comes up? Because in my mind, every time I hear a person say, you can't find God, is that the question? Or is the question they're trying to answer is, if I belong to, say back again to following the shaman or this guru, is that my path, and should I stay on that path? And that's the end process, the end point of my path of I can terminate right here. And I did find salvation. Is that the question that a person is trying to answer? Because if that's the question, then that can lead to some very different, strange routes. Then the next question I'm wondering, is it the person is asking the question not so much about the path to finding God, and I guess I would have to contact the gentleman and ask him, what is he talking about? But isn't it not the question so much about finding God, but it's the question about, is it the faith I live by? Because in discussions, sometimes this idea about the faith I live by, where people are arguing not so much for what is truth, but can I live by this faith and be saved? That means if I have a faith tradition and I follow it faithfully, and in my sincerity of heart, can I be saved in that faith tradition, or in that, I would ask another question here, in that lifestyle practice? So hopefully you understand. If you don't understand that, well, I'm going to go through now these texts, and hopefully you'll become clear what exactly I'm getting at. So the path to finding God, is that the issue, or the faith I live by, or as I put it, the path to finding God and the faith I live by are two things. There are two issues that are being discussed, and the question is, if I'm finding God, I'm seeking God, should I terminate at a certain point and a certain lifestyle practice and a certain worship practice? So this is the question. Because somebody could say, well, I'm over here and I'm messing about with the trees and I'm hugging the trees. Is that terminus? Is that the end product? Do I stop right there? Or could I go from a point of view of hugging trees, and then to the next moment I'm bowing before a mountain, the next moment I'm on the top of the mountain, the next moment I start to line up with things that are revealed in the Bible, and then I start to follow Jesus? Is that the path? Or is it that I can still be worshiping a tree and my lifestyle doesn't matter? Because I think many times people are defending lifestyle, not faith religion, because the faith religion often instruct the lifestyle. But if I'm in a lifestyle that is not working, should I keep finding my way? Should I keep moving on up? And that's where the question is. So let's go back to verse 22 of John chapter 4. John chapter 4, verse 22. Here Christ states, though, and I'll read it again for you. Ye worshipped, talking to the woman at the well, and there were two religious groups, the Samaritan, which is a mix of paganism and Christianity, or paganism and Judaism, and the Jewish system, which was, Old Testament religion, but in rebellion. And so Christ now states, ye worship ye know not what. Now that's a very profound statement from Jesus. Jesus is not playing around with this issue as the pastor was, and as many religious leaders do, as you heard from that article. Jesus said, you worship what you know not. So the woman said, yeah, we worship God. And Christ says, you don't know what you're worshiping. Because if you know God, God is going to instruct the faith you live by. And He's going to adjust the path you're on. If you know God. If you know God, that can be a definitive statement. So if you're on a certain path and your path is, this is the way we do worship, and you're terminated, you stop searching, and you're not moving in a certain direction, then you don't really know God, because God is infinite in knowledge. God is constantly being sought out and understood. One faith grows, and one experience and lifestyle changes and grows as you know God. So you can say from a worship and lifestyle point of view, to answer the two statements, if you're worshiping this way, you don't know God. That's a definitive statement. So next part of that statement, verse 22 still, we know what we worship. That's a very powerful statement again. There's a, you don't know what you worship. We know what we worship. Each of them is there's a punctuation. Next statement again. For salvation is of the Jew. For salvation of the Jew. So here is Christ saying that you can be a Hindu and find salvation. You can be an animist. You can worship idols and find salvation. Because this statement here on its own, and some of the others we're going to read after this, is saying that if you're in a certain experience, you have to find this part over here. This is very profound. This is the writing of John quoting Jesus. John is saying, This is what Jesus said. If you believe in the Bible, you believe in the writing of John, then this become problematic for the statement that any path can lead to Jesus, because he's saying you're on the wrong path. You need to come over to this path. I'm going to read it again for you. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship. For salvation is of the Jew. For salvation is of the Jews. Again, if you see you worship God and you know God, then you know God is a God of order. God is a God that rests. God is a God that's humble. God is a God that is creative. And you keep going about the attributes of God. God loves justice, but he loves mercy also. So when you bow down to all of that. But if somebody's living a lifestyle and on a path that leads them away from some of the things I say and more about God, then you could look at them and say you worship God, and we worship the same God, but the things you do contradict God. So how you say you know God? So the path of finding God and the faith you live by can become one and the same. Because if you're on a path, it's supposed to be leading to a certain terminus or a certain terminal. So if my life is going towards like every day feels like hell, and I say I worship God, then I start to say, wait a minute. If you listen to yesterday's program, you could see the general idea I was talking about. If my life feels like hell and I'm keep having fights and arguments and no peace in my life, and I say I worship God, I'm like, really? You're a follower of a true God? You're on a path of peace? Because somebody could say, well, doesn't God lead us to nirvana, where we become one with nature, one with God, one with our fellow human being? Yes, I guess. But if you're on a path and you see on a path of nirvana, it's all kind of madness. Then I'm saying the concept I understand, and I might agree with the concept, but if you're truly following God, the God's going to keep leading you on a path where you're supposed to end up where I'm ending up. So in one aspect, I can't disagree with some of the basic concept of being a better person, being better to nature, so forth and so on. But there's deeper issues when we follow Jesus that often are not touched on in any religion. The idea of denying of self-sacrifice, of the substitutionary death. That there, again, is in smattering of religions, but the clarity that the Jew understand is not there. Look at Acts chapter 4. Well, before we go to Acts chapter 4, let's go to the Zechariah here for me. I think it's Zechariah. Give me 1 second. Let me just get to this text here. So it is in Zechariah chapter 13. You're very familiar with the text. I'll go to this text as a pullback. So I'm making a step backward, kind of. Verse 6. Zechariah 13, verse 6. Now, if you look at Zechariah 13, verse 6, you see this fascinating idea here. And it says, and one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. This text is often used, and I just say it in narrative. This text is often used to describe where many people believe that there will be people in heaven that might not have a full understanding of Jesus. This would be one of the texts that you could use and say, see, a person might not necessarily understand Christianity per se, but they've lived a certain life by the leading of the Spirit. And living that life, they could be in heaven, or they will be in heaven according to this text. And they see Jesus Christ and they say, what are those wounds in your hand? And it says, I was wounded in the house of a friend. So many will point to this text, and I don't disagree with the conclusion that by the merits of Jesus Christ and the person living a certain life led by the Spirit, they dare not fully understand what Christ is, but Christ's blood covers. Just like how Christ's blood covers somebody if they're not baptized and so forth. Yet there's a text in Peter where Peter says, if the righteous are scarcely saved, how much more are the ungodly, right? If the righteous are scarcely saved, how much more are the ungodly? I don't think that text basically said that a person can't be saved without a total understanding or understanding clearly of Jesus. So I put that back as almost making a step back, that I'm going to say that Christ can save to the utmost. Christ died outside the city of Jerusalem. That is a statement that, again, salvation was not it was not only for the Jews, it's of the Jewish system. If you really want to understand it, it was something that you learn through the system. But the path and the faith is going to come in a certain way, because remember, most of what we talk about as salvation or lack of salvation is Christ dying to show us love. So somebody could say, well, a person could be from any religion that probably say don't accept Christ or understand Christ, but their religious experience make them love strangers. And yet you could come to a religious country that is claimed to be a Christian country, a so-called Christian country, and you meet many people who are Christians and they hate strangers. If you're a foreigner, they hate you. If you're not the same skin color as them, they hate you. So that's the thing where the complication comes in, because as the pastor was saying, right, and his arguments are not totally without merit, that there's so many things that divide us, and he sees like sometimes religion is used as a wedge. But I think it goes back again to righteousness, the lifestyle you live, the faith path you're on, and so forth. Because a person, you could go to a country and the person, you're a different nationality, different religion, and the person is hospitable and they do justice to you. If you're not a bad person, you're not trying to do crime, they treat you with respect. You could come to a country like America and you're of the same religion as the person, but because you're probably a foreigner and you're probably a different skin color, they treat you like an animal. And you say, wow, they're not even exemplifying godlike behaviors, really righteous behaviors. So I understand that. That means now pulling back. So somebody could say, because normally we have this discussion, I guess somebody would expect me to jump on the bandwagon and just be 100%. You have to accept Jesus Christ and stuff like that. I do believe that, but I would say now here's to pull the two things together before I step forward again. So just imagine now you have a person, two people standing there. One of them listened to their conscience. They never have the Bible, they never have the Holy Writ, and they were in a country where the Bible never got. And say I decided I'm going to visit their country, and I visit some country somewhere in the world, and I got into trouble with the natives. And this person here who been listening to the Spirit, they observe nature, they observe, nature is a lesson book about God, is part of the teaching of God. They observe life, they listen to their conscience, and something happened, and so the natives wanted to catch me and beat me up. And they risked their life to save me because they listen to the Spirit. And they treat me like a fellow human being. And then I'm in a country where amongst Christian people, and they grab me and they take me outside and they lynch me. But they say they're Christian. Now both people come up. I said the main people, the person was the instigator to beat me up, and the person was the instigator to beat me up and to save me. One is a Christian country, one is not a Christian country. Both people come up to judgment. And the person who is Christian who went and lynched me come to Jesus and said, Jesus, I claim your blood. And the person who is secular said, well, I don't know who you are, but I live by the Spirit and I was guided to live a righteous life. This is where the discussion becomes difficult, because in the Christian world, we'll say the person who is a murderer and hated his fellow human being and is racist and is all this, he should be saved because he claimed Jesus. This is what we say in the Christian world. But the person now who is, say, a cannibal, a barbarian, no, not about God, he's all he can read, and he risked his life to save me, and he exemplified the Christian trait. We would say, well, since he didn't claim the cross, and he know not about Jesus, he should be lost. But yet he, by the Spirit and by his conscience, was more righteous than the person that was not. So then is the statement wrong that he's saying? Well, here's the problem. I think that's why I'm naming it the path to finding God and the faith I live by. Because faith is normal the working of the Spirit. I just really believe that when you understand about Jesus and you read the Bible, it tends to lead you to a path of more righteousness, or a path of righteousness easier and more straightforward than without that. But remember that we still have the leading of the Spirit and the conscience. And I've been in situations where you could run into many situations where, again, you could be in a Christian country and you have people that are atheists and secular and liberals, as the conservatives always say, and they don't even claim no God, but they treat you with more kindness and more respect as a human being. That's been my experience. I've experienced this. Then a person who is a Christian and even from the same faith religion, and they're nasty as ever. And I say, wow, the exemplifying of our Lord Jesus Christ was more in the secular atheists that believe probably they evolve, and the person is Christian. So that's where it becomes a challenge. So I think even making statements like that or cutting a clip like that can become problematic, because I would still have to hear the whole sermon. So that being said now, hopefully I'm not thoroughly confused you. But that being said, this is why I say the path and the faith I live becomes, it changes the discussion, because I think sometimes these pastors are defending is a secular lifestyle or ungodly lifestyle while being a Christian. I hope you heard that. What I think they're defending many times is they're defending rebellion. What I think these pastors are doing is not so much defending, denominationalism. They're making it feel as if somehow I can be part of the Christian church or be part of this, and they're defending just basically faith. While for me, I really believe that if the Spirit of God is working with you, if you understand nature, if you understand the gospel, the number one way to understanding God, it should result in you living in a better path and you living a more faithful life. And so if a person is seen to be living in a better path and a more faithful life, but they're secular, cursed be you who is a Christian. Shame on you. If you have the number one way of understanding God and understanding how to line your life up and walk on a path that is straight, and if you understand the way of faith and how to be a faithful person, and you have Jesus as your testimony, you have Jesus that has died for you, you have the Spirit of God that's supposed to be working on you, and you're more corrupt and more nasty and more disrespectful and more everything that is not like God, then isn't it more of a condemnation for the Christian? And that's the situation. It's the same thing. If I say, somebody come to me and say, oh, I'm religious or I'm spiritual, and I say, what faith community you belong to? And they say, well, I belong to one of these denominations that are Christian, or I'm a Catholic, or I'm a Baptist, or I'm a Buddhist, or a Muslim. Then you're supposed to be treating me better than the secular person. More shame on you. So I think a lot of time people say these things, but I think some of the ulterior motive is to excuse rebellion. So let's go back now to Acts chapter 4. So I say that, all of that, let's go forward. Pull it back a little bit. Let's go forward here now. And I hope, like I said yesterday, you're thinking with me here, because these things can be very complicated, at least if you're a deep thinker. Acts chapter 4, verse 10 through 12. Notice this here says, but it is known unto you all, and to all people of Israel, that by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom ye crucified, whom God raised from the dead, even unto him both this man stand here before you whole. This is the stone which was set at naught of you builders, which is become the head of the corner. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men, whereby we must be saved. Now think about this here. The Jews had murdered Christ, had killed Christ, had crucified Christ via the orders that they gave to the Romans. The Romans were secular, so they didn't understand fully what was going on. But even as they heard Christ, they would realize that something is different with Christ. Pilate, Herod, whoever was dealing with Christ as a secular person, did not agree per se, but they submit to the pressure of the Jews. So the question is, who had greater guilt and who had better hope in that scenario? And the answer would be the Jew. The Jews who were supposed to be, it was supposed to be easier for them to understand the path of salvation. It was supposed to be easier for them to understand the faith I live by. We're supposed to be the least group, the furthest group to murder somebody that was righteous. But yet they were the most aggressive after going after Christ. So hence, as I was saying, understanding salvation, understanding that there's not a name given among men whereby one must be saved, should be more apparent to the Christian than the secular. And stating that a secular person could be saved without fully understanding Christ only should speak of the great salvation that Christ can wrought and the great mercy that God can give to a secular person. But if you're on the path of faith and you understand faith, then you should be more clearly understood that righteousness is expected, that a clean life is expected. And you should be doing something like going after somebody that's innocent. I hope you understand that point. In other words, I should expect more from a Christian person, than I should from a secular person. A secular person should not live in a way that, in my understanding, they seem to be closer to heaven than the Jew. If you remember the story when Christ, the lawyer asked Christ, how must he be saved? And he says, well, and the answer was, Christ asked him a question, and he said, well, you serve God with all your heart and your mind, and your soul, and you love your neighbor as yourself. And Christ said, you're close to the kingdom. The person who was supposed to really answer that question the best and fastest should have been the theologians, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. But here you have a lawyer that was very clear that at the end of the day, who was more righteous? The priest that ignored the person's suffering, the rabbi or the Levite that ignored the person's suffering, or the Samaritan that poured wound and take care of him? Who was closer to heaven? And yet somebody said, but Lord, you read in the beginning that the Samaritan don't know what they worship. But yet the same Samaritan that don't know what they worship was closer to heaven by their actions, because it was testified that the Spirit of God was working on their mind and they had a conscience and they had mercy for people suffering, than the person who was the Levite and the rabbi. So here you see that it is Christ can save to the utmost. Christ's mercy goes so deep. We know that it's more difficult for a person in their ignorance to do the right thing. But it's even a testimony that the person who knows better is of more responsibility, and that they should stop excusing themselves. I'll give you an example. I'll go to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 22 and 23. I'll keep with me here, and as I work through this. Deuteronomy 11, verse 22 and 23. For if ye shall diligently keep all these commandments which I command you, to do them, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave unto him, then will the Lord drive out all these nations from before you, and ye shall possess greater nations mightier than yourself. This is the arrangement of Israel. And the blessings of Israel was upon keeping the commandments, the statutes, all the precepts that God had put forward. And he says, if you keep them, you do them, and you walk in his ways, and you cleave to the Lord. This is similar to what we just talked about. You loving the Lord, taking care of a fellow human being. That's basically all the law and the prophets. The aim of God was for you to just love him and to take care of fellow human beings. Then it says the Lord will drive out all these nations. Why? These nations, now that were secular, were doing abhorrent things. The gospel came to help us to do the right thing. That's all it is. So here's the problem. If you had a secular nation that was doing the right thing, would that secular nation be closer to God than the Jews who were doing the wrong thing? Because that's all God is trying to do, is have us do the right thing. Do right by him and right by our fellow human beings. What Jesus came to die was to pay the penalty for our sins, but to lead us in a path of righteousness also. Say, look, I'm going to forgive you for the past, but I want you to move forward in the right way. And what you end up happening often was that there were times when Israel became so sinful and so wicked that even secular nations like Babylon needed to come in and straighten them out. That's how bad they became. So whose condemnation was more, and who was even closer to the kingdom? Because sin separated us from God. And if sin separates us from God, Christ came to tear down that middle wall of partition. Christ came to bring us back to God. And how are we going to get back to God? By removing sin. So the path to finding God is always a path that's laced with righteousness. But the Christian is on an easier way to that path because the Christian has clear instruction of how to. But if the Christian doesn't follow that way, then it's shame on the Christian. Again, the faith I live by is that I live by faith in the Son of Man, in the Son of God, and that gives me a clearer path and a clearer way to get to it, less confusion, so I can get closer to God. As I said in the beginning, if you understand that God is a God that is works 6 days a week, then if I'm lazy, I'm going to get up and say, wow, God works 6 days a week. I guess it's not bad for me to do 5 days a week. You see, I'm on a clearer path. Now, if a secular person looks at me and says, you're a bum, you want to work 2 days a week, well, shame on me. Because if it is that path, I'm on that path and I'm moving closer to God. If I'm moving closer to God, my worship and my actions will be testimony that I'm moving closer to God and I worship God. But if my action and my testimony is not that, then something is wrong. The flip of that is if I'm working 7 days a week and I can't have a day of rest, then whether I'm secular or Christian, I'm on the wrong path. I need to get back on the path. But the Bible gives me some clear instructions, so I don't have to look at nature and say, wow, the bears hibernate in the winter. I probably need to cut back in the winter. I can just go to the Bible and I can start studying the Bible. All of a sudden, it's like a rocket. I just take off, and I don't have to, figure it out and go through all this thing. I can just start reading and studying, and the Lord can bring me in a fast pace to Him and to line up with Him, with nature, with my fellow human being. He's telling me how to. See, that's how I understand salvation. Christ just cleared the path to take off the mess in our head so we can start to see the love of God and start to reinterpret the Bible. Because when we read the Bible, we saw fire and brimstone in the Old Testament. But because of the love of Jesus and Him dying on the cross, we read the Old Testament and the scales fall off our eyes. And all of a sudden we read and we realize, oh, so just God want me to just love Him more. It's not that He want to beat me up or command me and, force me and all that type of stuff and have me fearful of Him. He just want me to love Him more, but He doesn't want me to be disrespectful. Oh, He want me to treat my fellow human beings nicer. Oh, I get it. That's what Christ came to do for me. He came to show me, oh, no, God, you're misunderstanding God. God is not telling you not to steal from your neighbor because He wants you to fear Him. He's just trying to tell you, be nice to your neighbor. Oh, but a secular person could get that. You could realize, wait a minute. It's my neighbor. What am I fighting with my neighbor for? Because one day he's looking outside and he see 2 deers frolicking or 2 animals frolicking and he's thinking, man. And all of a sudden the Spirit come to him and the Spirit said to him, by his conscience, that's how you're supposed to be with your neighbor, brother. And he'd be like, okay, I'm going to do that. It's so forth and so on. Let me go there. As I say, I'm meditating and philosophizing here. So here we go. So notice here, it says, there's no other name under heaven given among men whereby they be saved. When you understand the principles of nature, that nature will sacrifice to save, it's hard to get it because, you see, here's a problem. This is why I believe in the Bible, I believe in Jesus. Because when you study the life of Jesus, you can get it real fast. Because you see it right there on display. But because, again, why? Because a scientist could study nature and they see the actions of bacteria or virus and they get thrown off the path. They don't understand. They see it as violent and vicious and you got to protect yourself. They don't see nature working in some crazy ways to save. But when you understand the gospel, what it is, you turn, you look at nature, you're like, oh, nature is preserving. That's weird. I didn't get that at first, but Christ taught me that the principles of nature or principles of the cross is the principles being displayed in nature. And oh, that's fascinating. Because nature can come through some very violent, vicious ways to save. So is the way of the cross. It's bloody and it's horrible, but it's safe. Oh, I'm realizing, you see, this is what it is. It's difficult to sometimes try to wrestle these topics within an hour because I just looked up and literally I thought I had like half an hour to go. And I just basically, I'm just warming up here. So anyway, because this topic to me is, I find it fascinating. So to me, the path of finding God and the faith I live by, the gospel gives me like a highway in comparison to going on local roads and more able to get lost. The gospel just tell me, hey, look, you know where you're trying to get to? I'm gonna tell you, go to this chapter, go to this text, study about Christ, and it's like you just go to the highway and you exit. Bam, you're there. Going through the other parts, it becomes very difficult because the principles are there. Somebody say, well, what do you do with storms and stuff like that? Sometimes you need a reset. What you do with winter, you need that. Without winter, then you have these constant outbreak of diseases that you see in tropical countries because bacteria never get a time to go dormant. And that's where the rat to come. Somebody say, but doesn't we have the flu epidemic in the winter? Not really. What we have is an eating epidemic in November, December. And then people's immune system is wiped out. They're not prepared for the winter and the cold. As human beings, we need fluid, especially in the winter, and warmth. And then we need some nutrients. We stay healthier than even people in tropical nations. But that's a host. Probably I should talk about that tomorrow. So if you look at that, let's look at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 13. I feel kind of sad here. Probably have to pick this up next week, Wednesday. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 through 13 says, by grace are you saved through faith, and that of your not of yourself, is a gift of God. Right? So salvation is a gift. It's kindness. As I say, somebody say, well, how do you apply that to nature? It's the same thing. You go in nature, you pick a bush, and you start biting on the bitter root. The plant die. It's a gift. So somebody say, well, how is it a gift? Because God created that herb to deal with our disease. What is the source of our disease? It's our rebellion. It's a gift. It's a gift of God. God gave us that before sin came into being. Golden seal, which is important this time of the year. Echinacea, which is important this time of year, was created by God before we ever sinned. So somebody say, how that apply to salvation? When you read the Bible, you find out that Christ was given as a salvation for humanity before man sinned. It's a gift of God. So you can find the principles in nature. And when you look at it, you say, oh, that's not, nature didn't evolve. Because evolution would mean that you have to have the problem, and then the problem you adapt to the problem or evolve to the problem to fix the problem. But you realize the solutions were given before the problem occurred. And we could keep going on and on. But so anyhow, it says, verse 10, for we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God had before ordained that we should walk in them. So here goes one of the big problems with what the pastor was saying. Because when I say the path of finding God and the faith I live by, Christ have already ordained how I should walk. In other words, from the spiritual to the physical, how I should live with my neighbor, how I should drink. Christ already foreordained that I have to drink water. So somebody say, I'm on a path and I just found out that I have to drink water every day. Amen. Welcome, brother. Praise the Lord. I'm on a path and I realize that plant-based diet is best for me. Amen, brother. Welcome. You just joined most of India and many of us who are already vegan and plant-based. But I have a faster way to find it. I go to the Bible tells me that we're created to eat a plant-based diet. Boom, I'm there. Somebody, I went to the doctor, I have allergies to protein. I said, brother, all allergies are protein-based. So you need to get off most proteins. I'm on a path. I realize I shouldn't eat all this genetically engineered food and stuff like that. Well, welcome. If God didn't create it, you should be eating it. Don't eat what's man. See, we all end up, it's that path because God had created the process. God created me not to lie or to steal or to commit adultery or to bear false witness. God created me to worship. God had created me to worship God and, on the seventh day. But I could go around all kind of stuff in life, or I could come to the Bible gives it to me. But this is all a gift from God. This is all through the mercy and the love of God. And when we look at the cross, what we see quicker is that, all of this is for my good. There's sin and there is evil. And, it's very tumultuous to deal with sin and evil. So much more here. Wherefore remember that ye being in the past time Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hand, that at that time ye were without Christ, being alien from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in this world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Jesus Christ. See, to me, when you're far off, is that you could get there, I guess, but you're far off. You're going to get lost so many times that's why the gospel comes. That's why Jesus Christ bring the Bible. This is why we have the revelation through Jesus. He came to earth. Men were lost in their sin and iniquity, trying to grope in darkness. And when you're in darkness, it's hard to find your path. It's hard to walk in the path. It's hard to find faith. So again, I'm not saying that a person could come through a circular way, but it's more difficult. As Peter asks the question: if the righteous who have Jesus on the cross is scarcely saved, how is the ungodly going to end up? And I'm not going to say that it's not possible for a person to come to the Lord, never hear about the cross, but it's very difficult because they're so far off the path that the devil will keep tripping them up and so forth. That's why the gospel, the Bible, preaching of Jesus Christ is so important. It will be to, I don't know if I could preach about the sacrifice that plants give. I could preach about how bacteria work and how terrible they are, but how good they are. They have a process. We have bacteria in our gut that are good and bad, and they're there for various different reasons. I could explain all of that, and a person say, so you're expecting me to understand the way of salvation by just not understanding the cross? And I would agree with them. It's going to be very difficult for a person to understand how to get close to Jesus by just studying nature, because there's things in nature that can throw you off. And it's easier to study the cross. It's easier to look at Jesus. And this is why he says they're far off. But the lessons are there. But when you come to the cross, the lessons become clear. The anomalies, the distortions, the contradictions, I should say, they become clearer in Jesus. And they become like a bright light. But the lessons are there. Our conscience are there. People hear the conscience. People know when they're talking to you nasty that they shouldn't talk to you that way. But when you come to Jesus, you realize, oh man, he unless you came at him, Christ would always be nice and kind. And the people who always got it from him was the Pharisees, because they're nasty as ever. And so you start to learn that Christ is meek and lowly in heart. And that's the way you're supposed to live. But if you don't study Christ, you really don't get it, because you think, if you're meek and lowly, you're going to get railroaded and run over. I don't think I've ever done this, but I'm going to take a few more minutes because, as I say, I think I'm going to be left hanging, and especially for those going to listen later, and for the continuity of the presentation. And I know many of you probably get into work and stuff like that, but I'm just going to go through a few more texts before I close this out. So I think I've never done this, but I'm going to go beyond my time this morning here because of, I think, I don't want to leave too much confusion as a continuity of one presentation. So Romans chapter 1, verse 16 through 22. Romans chapter 1, verse 16 through 22. I'm going to just keep going here. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation, to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. So that's clear. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. As it is written, the just shall live by faith. Not faith by faith, as our many Christians believe, or spiritual by faith, but live. That means in their daily walk. So notice, the righteousness of God is revealed. So the right doings of God. So when we come to the Bible, we start to understand how to live. And that life is instructed by faith in the Word of God, teaching us how to do right. So the path to finding God and the faith I live by is the real issue in the question. Because that path will lead to God, but it will lead to certain conclusions of lifestyle choices. And that's the issue. So I'm not saying that a person who says a Muslim should know that they should be suicidal. They should live to give life to others. But it might be harder to find in that faith community because probably there's an environment that's blocking it. And instead of learning that it's better for me to sacrifice my life to make somebody live, I come out twisted believing that I should sacrifice my life to kill others. Notice there are two different paths, two different lifestyle choices, two different conclusions. But if I study Jesus, I can quickly find, oh no, I don't go sacrifice myself and then blow up others to win my cause. In order to win my cause, I should be willing to lay down my life and my life only to make somebody else live. So hence a person who is, say in a Muslim faith, could come out and say, you know what, Ben? I'm on a different path than probably somebody else. But I see my brother doing something and I'm going to run over there. I'm going to take the bullets for those people. And then now somebody say, well, yeah, he take the bullet from those people, but he's not a Christian. And then now we go to heaven and realize Jesus Christ saved him because Christ says he understood me more and he exemplified me more than a person who was a Christian. But the end result is have to be the same, in other words. In other words, the end result have to be the same. You understand that I live my life so that others may live. I'm willing to lay my life down so others may live. I'm willing to sacrifice my career, sacrifice my ambition, sacrifice my money in the bank, sacrifice my even clothes on my back so that somebody else could be warm. That's the Christian principle. So somebody in the faith community could believe that Christian principle. But at the end of the day, that's our way to God. So if the argument is that a person could be, which is a different argument now, this is where I say I wanted to keep talking. If the argument is a person could be of a different faith community, a different experience, or even a secular atheist person, but they show more the Christian principles, that would tell me that that person is closer to God. Because like I say with the lawyer was closer to God, or in the story of the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan was closer to God than those who claim to know God. Those who Christ says salvation of the Jew, but yet when the question was asked, who is more righteous? The person who showed more righteousness, who showed more that they're more like God. So the question is, are you more like God? Or are you less like God? Is your religion just talk, or is your religion righteousness as is revealed in the Bible? And should you not be kinder, more sacrificial than a person who is, say, a secular person? Because if you say, I know Jesus, well, you're supposed to be one of the most loving person that love people from any nation, any kindred, any tongue, any people. But if you say you're a Christian and you follow Jesus, then shame on you even more. Bigger condemnation on you for not showing the Christian principles. Nasty as ever. That you just, no nice things I can say about you. Somebody say, are you being judgmental? Yes, I'm judging based upon the biblical principle. Because I'm saying that I should not be treated better by a secular person than a Christian person. That's what my Bible is teaching me. I should not go over to a person who say, well, I don't really believe, I believe Christ is a prophet and I'm Muslim. And they treat me nicer than a person who's a Christian person. That to me is a different argument. Somebody might say it's the same argument, it's a different argument. If you say there's one way to heaven through Jesus Christ, then if you believe that, then more responsibility on you to then that you believe in that, say, wow, you really need to be a Christian then. You really need to stand on Jesus. I need to see it in your life. You know, somebody said to me, oh, I don't believe in sacrificing any of my money for the gospel's sake. And you're a Christian? I hope to God that a secular person is not more kind than yourself when it comes on to the poor and those who need to be educated and so forth. Because if you're a Christian, then you need to show forth more that you're on the path of finding God and you're on the faith that is established in the Bible. That can be seen in nature and in human beings dealing with human beings. Christians should be more warmonger, more willing to destroy and annihilate, and then say they're Christians. So notice here, it says, there in the righteousness of God revealed, as is written, the just shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. So God reveals his wrath against people who claim to be Christian. I don't care who it is, because somebody say, well, what if the preacher believe that? Do you agree with him or disagree with him? I disagree with him. But if I deal with him as an individual and he show me more kindness than a person who is from my faith religion, who's preaching that there's one way to be saved, then I'm going to say I'll go with the person who is preaching all kind of gobbledygook, but they treat me nicer. They're kinder. They show me more that they're Christians. Because people believe, well, I just need to stand on doctrinal principles, but I'm ungodly as ever and I'm a little wretch. Well, I'm going to say, how you following Christ and you're ungodly like that? Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And you know what it says next. If I understand Jesus and I believe that God created the heavens and the earth, I'm getting closer to God. I believe that God created man, male and female. I'm getting closer to God. So if I'm a Christian and I'm promoting, a marriage could be between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, then how you say you know God? Because a person who is secular be able to look at the plumbing and look at the male and female and know no two males supposed to be together, no two females supposed to be together. It's self-explanatory. So if I have the Bible and the Bible instruct me in the way of God, I should come to the same path and the same faith to live by and come to the same conclusion. And I supposed to be able to, a person has their conscience and their brain and their eyes are working, that is secular, supposed to be able to come to a similar conclusion. Yeah, I can see. It makes no sense. Yeah, male and female are different, both in disposition, personality, character, physicality, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, I can see that. So in my mind, if you're on the right path, all roads going to lead to a certain conclusion. Somebody could say, so you're saying a secular person come to the conclusion that we should live to bless others? Yeah, I believe that. You should live to sacrifice? Yeah. I could agree if a secular person said there's no Christian or no human being should take their life and massacre other people, and no matter who they are, I could agree with a secular person on that. So the path leads to the similar conclusion, because these things can be reasoned through even by a secular mind if they're willing to listen to the Spirit. We're going to skip some text because of the sake of time. We're going to close on this one. Wish I'd added more time. I don't want to go way beyond. John chapter 1 verse 1 through 5 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth into darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And so we know this is especially talking about the Jewish people. They had a veil and still have a veil when they read about Jesus. But this is why Christ says they're without excuse. It doesn't matter who come on this world scene, whether they be secular, Buddhist, Muslim, Catholic, Christian, whatever. When truth comes and the light comes, it is not God's fault, but it's man's fault. Because there are certain things that make sense. As I say, every time I see like the killing of cattle, I say, that kind of makes sense. That seems barbaric. Why we have to sacrifice all these animals to eat? And there's other people come along and say, yeah, I get that too. I believe that. When you look at life, you start to realize, and we look at the Bible, you realize the difference and the main point is that when we come to Christ, everything becomes clear. When we understand the sacrifice of Christ, everything becomes clear. And this is why I believe, with all what I said, is that the way to salvation, the path to salvation, the person that is salvation is Jesus. And if you understand life, and you understand that life is about sacrifice, life is about being, doing the right thing, about righteousness and right living. And if you learn about Christ, you see that Christ makes sense, and that Christ is truly the way. You should, that faith path, I believe the difference is should lead you to Christ. And then you will come to the conclusion whether you're on a different path, and however you came to that path, in other words, I'm saying, if you're on the right path, sooner or later, whatever circular route you're using to get there, you should still come back to the end result of what I just read. That in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the same was in the beginning. And He was the light and the life of men. And when you see the cross, you could say, and now I see nature. And now I get those lessons I was learning. When I used to feel pain for people who are suffering, now I understand Christ. And understand why He's the way. So He's the way, the truth, the life. So somebody might say, well, so what do you say? I'm saying basically that you might not start out by your first opening of your eyes was, say, Christianity. You might not start out by that way. You might start out via philosophy, or via this, via that, via even strange parts of movie, whatever. But Lord could be leading you down a path, and your path step by step is leading to one conclusion. But if you're on the right path and you listen to the Spirit, you're going to ultimately come to this conclusion that Christ is the way, is the truth, and the life. And the proper way of salvation is that when you find that path, and the more you find that path, is the more you're going to be leading to a righteous life. Your life going to be cleaner. Your life going to be better. That's how I understand it. But you might not start out the way I started out, or the way your neighbor started out, or the way your spouse started out. But you're going to start going on a certain path. You're going to start to see in life that humility, self-sacrifice, self-control, all these things are the path that you're going on to. And all they're leading you is you're going to start to see that in all of this was displayed in the teachings and the life of Jesus. And you're going to come to that point where you're going to be back at the feet of the cross. But you're not going to stop where you're at. You're not going to say, well, I'm Muslim, I'm stopped there. Or I'm Hindu and I'm stopped there. Or I'm Catholic, I'm stopped there. I'm Christian from some denomination, I'm stopped there. You're going to go deeper and deeper. But the deeper you get, is the more you're going to get to Jesus. So I don't disagree with the idea that says you might be on one path, but that path should not stop there. That's where I disagree. You should ever learn. You should be learning and getting deeper understanding of nature and God and the God of this universe. And it should lead you to deeper and a different walk. But I believe, like Abraham, you should be moving on and upward. Hopefully that's somewhat clear. We will talk about this in the future again. Let's pray. Our Father, watching heaven, we thank you for Jesus. We thank you, dear Lord, for how you brought us to this place. We thank you for calling us out of darkness. We thank you for the experiences you gave us in life, dear Lord, that wake us up to salvation, wake us up to the need for something greater, something deeper, that we were not satisfied where we were. We wanted to have a greater taste of Jesus. I pray that you may continue, dear Lord, this march in our lives, that you may continue to lead us on the path that you have chosen and laid out from the foundation of the world, that as we live, we might become more like Jesus, more sacrificial, more loving, more humble. Bless us, we pray. Thank you for the sacrifice of your Son. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Pray to me. God bless you. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning, where we should talk about natural health. Until then, I pray that you may walk with the King.